So let's talk about how enterprise browsers are addressing specific type of use cases or solving specific problems. So maybe we talked about a little bit about VDI, we talked about VPN. Maybe just pick one and let's just go into that a little bit. How does it differ from a VDI solution right now?
So with a VDI solution, you have a lot of layers to your solution. You have your user experience is always going to be the number one component on that. It's going to have your infrastructure, your knowledge workers from a IT scenario, how to manage the applications, how to deploy the applications, how to update and manage the applications. There's a lot in that stack from a true VDI scenario that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort for IT administrators, even down to the end users installing an agent to get into it, whether it's a Citrix VDI or a Horizon VDI or an Azure VDI. There's a lot of layers to get into that. And when you look at a enterprise browser, the simplicity comes into it where the users can click a link. And as long as they have basic access on their endpoint, they can run and do a simple install and very quickly access a full-fledged browser that they sign into with their corporate credentials. It automatically configures it with, their single sign-on processes, their let's say if they have particular plugins for maybe certain extensions that they need for certain websites, even down to their favorites and dashboards. And so within a couple minutes, they have a fully fledged access to their corporate environment for all sorts of browser-based interactions.
Okay. Well, we also know that there's not only web apps and SaaS-based applications. So how do you address it with an enterprise browser these days?
So it's interesting because obviously there are more than just web-based access. However, if you're looking for something, let's say it's an application or a tool that you need to install from a corporate network, you can utilize your enterprise browser to gain access to that tool to download, install, and gain access to that. So there's a lot of scenarios where you don't want to provide a VDI desktop or in what we were talking about before with a VPN, but we want ease of use to be able to get that user to get to those tools, to download those tools, install them, and get back to doing what they need to do in their day-to-day task.
So like in that use case, what you might be doing is a use case of certain users that only need web applications or SaaS apps. Enterprise browser is a no-brainer. But for those use cases where they're like, well, I need a couple more applications, some of these enterprise browsers are now providing that VPN-like access for those applications without the need for a VPN, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you think about other tools that are out there or the common tool of per app VPN, this can help bridge that gap between the user, their corporate network, if you will, to be able to gather those tools, bring it down to the endpoint, and be able to install those with the user's integration for it.
Okay. Cool. And so that sounds very familiar from a VPN perspective. You're kind of flipping it. Instead of giving everybody full VPN access, we're going to be giving them SaaS-based and web apps first, and then everything else will be kind of VPN-like access. Is that about right?
Definitely, because if you think about a lot of applications as well, and coming from an IT scenario, VPNs are great, but they're very restrictive for users. So in some scenarios, you actually hurt the user experience when deploying a VPN because you may require all of your traffic to go back to your appliance or your data center to then reach into the network to get those applications or to get those resources. So when you deploy an enterprise browser, generally you have a single point of entry, whether it's a DMZ appliance or maybe you're looping through said enterprise browser connectors, if you will, to get back to the resource that you need to get to. And so the user experience is a lot better because you're not limiting the user to go directly to that data center and cause all traffic, maybe not even actual work related, to loop through that. And that causes a very bad user experience.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I definitely see when I talk to a lot of customers that, it's VDI versus VPN, and they kind of treat it like a scale between the two. I think enterprise browsers are a good medium in many cases. I don't think VDI is going away. I don't even necessarily think VPN will be going away, but this actually can address additional use cases without, like you mentioned, the cost of maybe the back end infrastructure for VDI or the complexity of managing an endpoint with all the applications and the security tools just so you can VPN in and use an application. Like this can be a very good bridge for a lot of customers.
Definitely. And if you think about it just from a IT governance deployment scenario, VDI, like you said, a lot of stack that you have to manage. VPN, maybe it's simplistic just to say if you have a VPN, you're connecting everything through us for any either work related or non-work related. And that works well in some scenarios, but there's management on both sides of that that can be a little or a lot. And so, like you said, this middle ground of the enterprise browser is, hey, let's provide what we know the end user will essentially need and not force them to utilize something that they may not need and cause a bad user experience.